Hello, I am Graham Bell, and as board member, I send you warm greetings from all my colleagues at Europa Nostra, the European voice of civil society committed to cultural heritage. But I also take this opportunity to send you our heartfelt sympathy and support following the terrible earthquake on 30th of October. For though the epicenter was at Izmir, it is both a reality and a symbol that such pains within the earth are felt much wider, causing all of us to recognize how precious life is and how much we rely on a stable balance between us and our world. I wish to share with you today some insight into the significance of these matters at a European level. Is there a distinctiveness in how the people of Europe have a relationship with their place in the world as a people, place, and traditions? Those of us who take pleasure in our history can feel it gives reassuring security in the sense of long-established stability and values. But climate is as much a determining characteristic of Europe as languages or craft skills or other forms of expression. It can be an inspiration and can remind us it is not as it always has been. Climate does not conform to policies or strategies. Our rich and diverse cultural heritage is a narrative inseparable from context. For example, a photograph of archaeology or a building or industrial heritage contains clues about the climate in which those sites were created and expected to perform. From baked clay buildings of the Mediterranean to the earth and turf structures of Iceland, our cultural heritage is a record of our ancestors' naturally creative responses to maintain a symbiotic relationship with their environment in ways that are just as identifiable as handwriting or spoken language accents and dialects. Globalism has shrunk the world. 4 generations ago, it would be common to spend a lifetime within walking distance of home. COVID has reminded us that freedom of travel and of social association cannot be taken for granted. Despite all of our technological and economic achievements, ultimately it is health that is the great leveler across societies. In 2020, and tragically in Turkey, we have witnessed the combined perils of the health of people and of the earth. I have personal cause to understand this assault on 2 fronts. I've been working with a stonemasonry school in Croatia, which has suffered a decline in attracting young students since the fall of Yugoslavia, an example of next generations favoring instead jobs in computer programming or the media. I was at Zagreb Cathedral shortly before its earthquake and shared the heartache and resilience of preserving the visible traditional crafts upon which our cultural heritage depends, whilst fighting off the unseen virus threat to those with skilled hands. These are reminders that the earth and its climate are no respecters of national borders or other human overlays. As we also know from volcanic eruptions or even catastrophic events such as Chernobyl or Beirut, and now COVID, a location-specific source quickly impacts universally. COVID exploits our innate need of social interaction. Similarly, responses to all these threats also can only succeed through social interaction. That means us, doesn't it? Surely we can count on each other, can't we? And yet, at a high-level policy event held last year, 1/3 of the audience indicated that they do not believe in climate change. If such a large proportion of influential society does not consider there is a problem, how can a solution wholly dependent upon social collaboration ever succeed? Perhaps for us, realization is dawning. And as the infrastructure of policy, governance, and resources is backed by legislation, whether by incentive or adding yet another layer of threat, people will bend to the wind. But will they respond to a breeze or need a hurricane? United Nations projections show that if we began action in 2010 to meet the 2030 carbon reduction targets, the rate of change would have been 3.3%. But we didn't. If all of us, acting with social cohesion, get the message today and give this everything we can throw at it, the rate expected of us has now more than doubled to 7.6%. Is that an incentive, just as the United States has withdrawn from the Paris Treaty? What if we now in 2020 collectively say, okay, we get it, but be realistic, it will take time. If the action really begins in 2025, then the gradient becomes almost unbelievable. And given the dependency on society, it really does need to be believable at 15.4%. If we can't change the world in 10 years, can we at least change Europe? In November 2019, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced new policies that in 2020 translated into one of the most profound initiatives of any commission. The European Green Deal is not a single directorate policy, but one encompassing everything a united Europe can be expected to achieve. Its headline objective is that elusive target of 2030 carbon reduction. Today, I want to concentrate on the aspects of the European Green Deal that have particular meaning for us in the cultural heritage sector of Europe. Given all that I've said, you may be surprised to learn that you will not find the words cultural heritage in the European Green Deal. Of course, for Europa Nostra, this was a call to action. How can climate action be achieved without the values, traditions, tangible and intangible cultural heritage, which characterize and motivate us? Therefore, in collaboration with ICMOS, we began an intensive process to prepare a compelling European Green Paper setting out how absolutely intrinsic cultural heritage is to the European Green Deal, both in the process of behavioural change and in the resources we have, which includes the historic towns and cities that make Europe the world's top tourism attraction. We will respond to all relevant aspects of the Green Deal, but in this short interview, I want to highlight the renovation wave and emerging concept of a new European Bauhaus. We know that buildings account for about 36% of all greenhouse gas emissions. So improving the performance of buildings could make a significant impact, especially as 35% of buildings in Europe are at least 50 years old, and most in fact, do not meet current performance targets. The renovation wave sets out to achieve the carbon reduction target by improving the performance of 35 million buildings by 2030. To achieve this, we'll create 160,000 green jobs. If we are serious about climate action, then we who represent cultural heritage need to actively contribute to this process and make sure that the renovation wave reconciles preservation of the characteristics of historic buildings with their ability to contribute to climate action. The risk is that the renovation wave, in the wrong hands, decimates our cultural inheritance. The prize is if hands skilled in traditional techniques guide sympathetic enhancement. So please do what you can to be part of this. The European Green Deal is backed by a €1 billion Horizon 2020 fund for proposals across all 10 themes, with a deadline in January, and by an announcement of a new European Bauhaus, in which there is implicit, if not explicit, focus on the need to use natural building materials in combination with performance-enhancing techniques as part of an innovative platform for collaboration. Here too, your expertise could prevent insensitive retrofit to historic buildings and ensure that traditional skills are not sidelined in the rush to perform. Though in our sector we may think of cultural heritage as being the more photogenic and special sites, let us not be too narrow in our perspective. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are inclusive and far-reaching. COP26 was to be held this month in Glasgow, but COVID has postponed it for a year. In its place, the Climate Heritage Network is hosting a range of activities to demonstrate how cultural heritage is essential to the Sustainable Development Goals, and therefore also to the European Green Deal. Europa Nostra's Green Paper will be published on the 19th of November, impressing upon the European Commission the importance of integrating cultural heritage considerations in all relevant aspects of the European Green Deal. I quote from our working draft. These living traditions of cultural heritage, craft and creativity have an important role in delivering a climate neutral and circular economy today. And if the term circular economy is unfamiliar to you, think holistically of how every resource, land, settlements, property, traditions, materials, labor, finance, food, education and training can be best delivered in ways that would have been natural and sustainable in a localized social economic community. But I remind you of the policy conference experience last year. If we in the cultural heritage sector are not of one voice, united in our convictions about climate change and the need to combine cultural heritage action with it, then we risk being bystanders while those in the mainstream property and development industries transform the places we value to meet carbon targets, but at the expense of the places we value. We are the climate. We will change. Thank you.